The logic seemed simple: raise tariffs on Chinese goods and force Beijing to play fair. Protect American industries, bring back jobs, make America competitive again. But 7 years in, what are American families actually getting? Not cheaper goods, not booming factories. They're getting higher grocery bills. They're paying more for everything from washing machines to tools. And the jobs? Still gone. In 2025, the cracks are no longer hairline fractures. They're wide open breaks. Small businesses are collapsing under rising costs. Construction firms can't get affordable steel. Hardware stores are charging 30% more for the same wrench. Meanwhile, Chinese exporters are quietly shifting to other markets or relabeling goods through Vietnam or Mexico. Protectionism, it turns out, doesn't hit the factory floors in Shanghai. It hits the wallets in Cleveland. Tariffs were designed to punish China. Instead, they're punishing Main Street. Since the original Section 301 tariffs under the Trump administration and the continued escalation under both Biden and Trump's second term, American imports from China have been slapped with rates ranging from 10 to as high as 25%. In July 2025, Trump's reimposed economic war raised the heat further, with a blanket 40% tariff on strategic goods from China and 20% on imports suspected of transshipment via Southeast Asia. But the effects aren't staying on cargo ships. Retailers are reporting sharp price hikes across the board. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, appliance prices rose nearly 18% year over year, with imported models hardest hit. A basic refrigerator that cost $700 in 2023 is now over $850. Tariffs on electric components have made solar panels, EV chargers, and even smart home devices more expensive, stalling adoption. The construction sector, a backbone of blue-collar jobs, is also reeling. A report by the National Association of Home Builders notes that lumber and steel prices have risen over 25%, making it harder to build affordable housing. Small contractors who once relied on affordable Chinese-made hardware are now being priced out, or worse, shutting down. In consumer goods, even essentials are hit. Take tools. American brands like DeWalt and Milwaukee often source parts or finished products from Chinese suppliers. Tariffs force them to absorb higher costs or pass them to buyers. Most choose the latter. A simple cordless drill that was once $99 now retails for $129. Worse, substitution isn't always possible. While the U.S. hoped manufacturers would reshore production, few have. Moving supply chains is slow, expensive, and often unrealistic for products with globalized inputs. As one executive from a Texas-based logistics firm put it, you can't just snap your fingers and build a microchip plant in Iowa. Meanwhile, Chinese exporters have adapted. Many have rerouted goods through third-party countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, or Mexico, exploiting loopholes or investing in partial assembly operations elsewhere. Some simply pivoted to other growing markets like India, Africa, or the Middle East. For average Americans, however, there's no pivot, there's just a slow bleed. Groceries, home improvement, car maintenance, electronics, nearly every part of daily life is now touched by higher prices. Even U.S. manufacturers aren't necessarily cheering. Many still rely on Chinese inputs for complex machinery or rare materials. Their costs go up, their margins shrink, and their global competitiveness suffers. Ironically, the very policy designed to level the playing field now feels like a penalty on the home team. The logic behind tariffs has always been political, but the consequences are economic. Tariffs are designed to make foreign goods more expensive in hopes that consumers and businesses will switch to domestic alternatives. But that strategy only works if domestic production exists to fill the gap, and in 2025, it often doesn't. Over the past 3 decades, globalization fundamentally rewired American industry. U.S. companies offshored production not just for lower labor costs, but because entire supply chains, especially in electronics, machinery, and consumer goods, became tightly integrated across Asia. China wasn't just the world's factory, it was the hub where sourcing, assembly, and logistics converged. So when Washington raised tariffs, first under Trump in 2018, then extended under Biden, and now expanded again in Trump's second term, it wasn't hitting a foreign competitor. It was hitting a supply chain Americans were already dependent on. Let's break down the ripple effect. Cost shock at the input level. Many American manufacturers import components or raw materials from China, from circuit boards to screws, valves, plastic moldings, and rare earths. When these items become more expensive due to tariffs, input costs rise, especially for small and mid-sized firms that don't have negotiating power or diversified supply. No ready domestic substitutes. The U.S. does not have large-scale domestic production in many of the affected categories. For example, over 90% of power tool components come from Asia. The same goes for semiconductors, lithium batteries, and solar panel materials. Reshoring takes years and billions of dollars. In the short term, businesses can only raise prices or cut output. China isn't standing still. China has responded with precision. While absorbing some of the shock, its exporters are increasingly using tariff evasion strategies, relocating partial production to Southeast Asia, using third-country transshipment to dodge origin labels, offering bulk discounts and subsidies to retain market share in non-U.S. regions. Beijing also retaliated in ways that spared high-tech sectors but hurt American agriculture, like soybeans, pork, and grains, further deepening trade imbalances. Tariffs function as a hidden tax. Economically, tariffs are a form of indirect direct taxation. While politicians may claim they're charging China, the cost is paid by American importers and eventually passed to end consumers. A study by the Peterson Institute for International Economics estimated that over 90% of tariff costs are borne by U.S. firms and buyers, not Chinese exporters. Political signaling over market mechanics. At its core, the tariff policy is less about economic realism and more about political symbolism. It plays well in speeches, America first, take back our jobs, fight unfair trade, but it ignores how interdependent the modern economy has become. The policy overestimates China's pain threshold and underestimates America's exposure. Misjudging elasticity and global substitution. Tariff architects assumed that cutting off China would naturally benefit U.S. manufacturers. But in reality, many American firms have relocated sourcing to other low-cost countries, not to the U.S. In some cases, production just shifted from China to Vietnam, India, or Mexico, creating longer, more complex, and more fragile supply chains that still don't solve the original problem. Timing clash with other pressures. The tariffs also come at a time of already high inflation, elevated interest rates, and consumer debt. That means Americans are especially sensitive to price increases. And for businesses, higher borrowing costs make it even harder to invest in domestic alternatives. The result? A policy that might have worked in a different era. Before global integration, this before inflation shocks is now doing the opposite of its intent. It's not forcing China to concede, it's forcing Americans to absorb. And yet, despite mounting evidence of economic strain, the policy remains politically untouchable. In a divided Washington, being tough on China polls better than being realistic on trade. So the tariffs stay, the prices rise, and the public pays. Tariffs don't land evenly, they ripple disproportionately through the parts of America least equipped to absorb them. At first glance, it's tempting to view tariffs as an abstract economic tool, a policy lever, a geopolitical signal. But for millions of Americans, the effect is not theoretical, it's personal. It shows up in higher bills, shrinking margins, and lost opportunities. And it's not just hitting one sector or one class, it's hitting across the socioeconomic spectrum in ways that are deeply uneven. The harshest impact lands on those who can't trade down. When the price of basic appliances, tools, furniture, or car parts increases by 20 to 30%, middle and low-income households don't have room in their budgets to absorb it. These are the families already facing higher rent, groceries, and gas prices. A family in Ohio that needs to replace a water heater now faces an $1,100 price tag, up from $850 2 years ago. There's no domestic alternative. There's just more debt or deferring the purchase and risking worse breakdowns. Unlike luxury buyers, these households can't simply buy American when the U.S. doesn't even make the product. The result is silent inflation, with no choice but to pay. While large corporations have global supply teams and negotiating leverage, SMBs are the first to feel squeezed. A metal workshop in Pennsylvania that used to source aluminum sheets from Guangdong now pays 25% more, or has to order from a supplier in Mexico with less reliability and longer delivery times. Construction contractors, hardware retailers, import wholesalers, Especially those in Middle America report having to either raise prices and lose customers or eat the cost and risk bankruptcy. According to a June 2025 survey by the National Federation of Independent Business, 37% of small manufacturers report they've had to reduce output or staff due to input cost inflation driven by tariffs. One furniture assembler in North Carolina put it bluntly, "We're not Apple. We can't spend millions relocating supply lines. All we can do is try not to go out of business." Tariffs were sold as a way to revive manufacturing, but ironically, many of the sectors they were meant to protect are now being harmed. Toolmakers rely on Chinese batteries and motors. Electronics assemblers need circuit boards and rare earths. Construction supply firms depend on affordable steel and fasteners. The outcome? Instead of a renaissance, the sector is experiencing a bottleneck. Demand exists, but costs are rising, timelines are slipping, and profits are thinning. Regions with strong logistics, import distribution, or light manufacturing bases, like Texas, Georgia, Michigan, and Indiana, are seeing localized economic stress. Port cities like Long Beach or Houston are dealing with higher import costs and slower volume recovery, affecting downstream retailers and distributors. And in rural America, where incomes are lower and economic resilience is weaker, the price hikes have sharper teeth. When your town has one hardware store and it suddenly adds a 30% markup, it's not a small inconvenience. It's a threat to self-reliance. Though not direct importers, farmers are caught in the retaliation zone. Chinese counter tariffs continue to target American agricultural exports, soybeans, wheat, dairy, in response to U.S. duties on tech and electronics. That means fewer markets, falling prices, and in some states, growing dependency on federal aid just to break even. In Iowa and Kansas, farm bankruptcies have ticked up again, a quiet but telling sign of trade tension fallout. Many immigrant entrepreneurs run small retail or wholesale businesses that rely heavily on Chinese supply chains. Think electronics kiosks, hardware stores, home goods, or clothing shops. Tariffs have pushed their overhead up significantly without the cushion or access to capital that big box competitors enjoy. Some have tried to reroute imports through Vietnam or Latin America, but that often comes with its own complications. Higher shipping costs, unreliable customs clearance, or quality control issues. Tariffs rarely make headlines in the suburbs, but they show up in the budget math. Rising prices for home maintenance, appliance repair, home tech upgrades, all of it slowly chips away at middle-class comfort and mobility. Tariffs are a stealth tax, especially when combined with higher credit card interest rates and declining real wages. For many, the American dream wasn't just about owning a home. It was about being able to maintain one. Tariffs are quietly making that harder. Beneath the political rhetoric and economic charts lie real lives, families adjusting, business owners gasping for margin, workers watching their hours disappear. Tariffs may be crafted in Washington boardrooms, but their weight is felt on loading docks, shop floors, kitchen tables. And the voices coming from those places tell a very different story than the policy briefings. We can't just pass the cost down anymore. Lisa Murillo, owner of a small appliance repair store in San Antonio, Texas. Lisa's business used to thrive on affordable replacement parts, many sourced directly or indirectly from Chinese suppliers. But in the last year, prices for electric motors, fuses, and even screws have jumped between 20 and 40%. At first, she tried to absorb the difference. Then she raised prices modestly. Now, she's losing customers. When a customer sees a $150 service fee to fix a $300 microwave, they walk away. I don't blame them. But I can't keep running a business on volume that doesn't pay the bills. Her suppliers tell her it's the tariffs. She's not political. She just wants to stay open. They told us this would help American manufacturing. Where is it? Jerome Tate, line supervisor at a metal parts plant in Indiana. Jerome's facility makes components used in farming equipment. The factory buys imported steel, does precision cutting and molding, and ships the parts across the Midwest. In early 2024, their supplier raised prices due to tariff costs. By spring, orders slowed. We thought maybe the tariffs would mean more business, more American demand. But instead, costs went up and orders dried up. Now they're laying off night shifts. Jerome's hours were cut. His team is down to 4 days a week. The promise of tariffs was jobs. What he sees is shrinkage. Every box we open is more expensive than the last. Nguyen Phat, importer of home goods and electronics in Garden Grove, California. Phat's family has run a modest warehouse distribution business for over 15 years, importing affordable kitchenware, LED lights, and small appliances from Shenzhen. Over the past year, shipping costs stabilized, but tariffs exploded. We have to pay 40% tariff on some items now. If a blender used to cost us $18 landed, now it's $25 or more. Then there's customs delays, inspections, and labeling scrutiny. His warehouse is half full because he's had to cut orders. His retail partners are buying less. He's considered moving sourcing to Vietnam, but the factories there either don't exist or charge more. Tariffs were supposed to hit China. I feel like they hit me. Customers are angry, but what can we do? Kelly Adams, store manager at a regional home improvement chain in Missouri. At her location, Kelly has noticed an uptick in complaints, not about the service, but about sticker shock. Power tools are up 15 to 20%. LED fixtures, extension cords, plumbing parts, all showing inflated price tags. People think we're price gouging, but these prices come from upstream. It's the suppliers, and they're getting hit with tariffs. We just pass it along. She admits the conversations are getting harder, and staff morale is down. It's tough to explain to a customer why a faucet is $30 more this year than last, especially when their wages haven't gone up. We thought this would bring jobs back. It brought nothing. Rosa Castillo, garment worker and single mother in El Paso, Texas. Rosa used to work for a small apparel company that sewed the final pieces from imported fabrics. The company hoped to expand if reshoring gained traction. But tariffs on Chinese textiles and machine parts drove costs too high. The owner laid off half the staff. He said he couldn't keep us and still compete with Vietnam or Bangladesh. So we're back where we started, chasing jobs that keep moving. Rosa now works part-time at a grocery store. Her rent is rising, so is food, so is everything. They say tariffs are about American strength. I just want American stability. I can't afford the American-made option. Wendell Brooks, retired veteran in Akron, Ohio. Wendell lives on a fixed income. When his washing machine broke in early 2025, he looked for a replacement. The made-in-USA models ran close to $1,000. The cheaper ones, mostly imported, were still $750 or more, up nearly $200 from a year prior. I served this country. I'm proud of it. But I shouldn't have to choose between laundry and groceries. He ended up buying a used unit from Craigslist. He says he understands national security, but not at the cost of day-to-day survival. These voices are not rare. They echo in towns and cities across the country, quietly, steadily, with frustration and fatigue. They are not political activists or economists. They are not interested in slogans. They are Americans doing the math. And the math doesn't work. For years, American leaders have insisted that tariffs are a weapon, a way to discipline China, rebalance trade, and rebuild industry. But in 2025, it feels more like a boomerang, thrown with force, and now returning, blunt and heavy, into the hands of the very people it was meant to protect. The theory was neat: pressure China, revive domestic manufacturing, shield American workers. But the reality is uneven, messy, and expensive. Supply chains are more global than ever. Domestic alternatives remain limited, the price hikes are real, and the winners? Hard to find. The question now isn't whether tariffs work as a concept, it's whether they make sense in the economy we actually live in. An economy where a smartphone contains parts from 5 countries, where a car's sensor might come from Shenzhen, be programmed in Bangalore, and installed in Kentucky. Where a small-town contractor depends on a dozen foreign vendors just to keep costs reasonable, where American wages haven't kept pace with American prices. Tariffs weren't designed for that world, yet that's the world we live in. And so we're left in a strange position, fighting a trade war with tools from another era against a competitor who has already moved on. Meanwhile, the bill is showing up, quietly, persistently, on every receipt, every invoice, every supply order. It shows up in postponed purchases, in canceled expansions, in unpaid rent. It shows up in working Americans silently adjusting to just a little bit less. The ultimate irony? The average Chinese consumer may not even notice the US tariffs, but the average American shopper does, every day. So maybe the real question isn't, are we being tough enough on China? Maybe the question is, are we being honest enough with ourselves? Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you found yourself paying more at the checkout line lately, or watching your business margin shrink without explanation, maybe it's not just inflation. Maybe it's a quiet trade war that you never signed up for but are paying for anyway. At the end of the day, tariffs aren't just policy. They're pressure points. They test how much strain a country can take before something breaks. The supply chain, the middle class, or public trust. We'll be watching closely as this story unfolds, not in theory, but in real lives, real businesses, and real wallets. Stay sharp, stay informed. And as always, we'll be back next time with more insight into the forces shaping American life. One policy, one paycheck at a time.